Ryan Aho here, and the one and only Bert Lehman, and we're going to bring you our 176th episode of A Blast to the Past. We're kind of debating about that, right? Is it a blast from the past? Is it a blast to the past? A look back, turning back the clock, turning back time, whatever it is. What we do on this show, right, is we take a look back at drivers, events, tracks, all kinds of fun stuff from the past. Sometimes we get somebody in on the show, maybe corresponds with that number, to have a little story time. Sometimes we just have a little tidbits. If you have a favorite driver, right? Next week, of course, number 77, 177. I do have a 177, by the way. But if you have a 177 or a 77, shoot us a message, a text, pictures, your favorite story, whatever it may be. We have some people that like to do that every week. Super thankful for them. Makes this fun. Before we get into that, a little shout out, buyraceshirts.com. You want to make sure this is the time of year. Get your apparel, get your hats, get your hoodies, get your t-shirts, get all the stuff you need for racers by racers. Take a look at buyraceshirts.com for all your racing apparel. So, Bert, number 76. Do you have any, first of all, any 176s for you?
I do not have a 176.
So I have a few. I don't have any 176s. I have a few 76. Then I got a couple trivia questions here for you too. Okay, we're gonna see if we can stump the old Bertmeister here. So, who do you have? Do you have any 76s? You got a couple?
I only have one.
Well, let's do this. We'll slot you in the middle. That way, I don't talk the whole time, right? So I don't know a lot about this guy, man. I would absolutely love it if a fan of the show could share some information about this gentleman in the comments. So back in the late 80s, Bert, Labor Day Shootout, a couple different events. A guy, I believe he is from the cities, Ray Tennant. He had a number 76 car, and I remember him coming up, and he had a van. Him and the wife pulled in. They went to the parents. They washed their car. They hung out there. I got to know him a little bit, and that's about all I remember about him. I looked up online. I don't think he's with us anymore. I think he passed a couple of years back here. But Ray Tennant, a guy that ran a late model back in the 80s. So fans, if you have any information on this gentleman, any favorite stories, share it in the comments, because I'd love to learn a little bit more about him. Me and Bert, we love the history of racing too. So if we get an opportunity to learn from the fans and the people watching a little bit about these drivers, man, that's super fun. So Ray Tennant is a guy that I have. Another guy that I have, Bert. So I went to college back right out of high school. I went to Bemidji State University in Bemidji, Minnesota. And I ended up rooming my second year. Got a house with a guy. I was renting a room from him, I guess. Ron Olafson. Now, have you heard of the name Alan Olafson before?
Kind of sounds familiar.
Yeah, Black Duck, Minnesota, over in Bemidji area. One of the high side hustlers, super talented race car driver. Ran B-Mod the last few years, back in an A-Mod this year. Well, Ron is his cousin. Ford guy. He ran a street stock back in the day. Big old boats. And he's been around. He's been involved, whether working on record crews at racetracks, selling parts, racing cars, helping a lot of different drivers. He helped John Seitz for a while. But Ron Olafson, a guy that shared about a year with out there in Bemidji State, and kind of a pretty fun guy, good guy, and a lot of people over in Western Minnesota, they know Ron. So we'll jump over to yours. Who do you have?
All right, I only have one, and this driver is associated with, I guess, a dark cloud over Shawano Speedway. Yeah, Leroy Arnold. He raced in the 1970s. I don't know if he raced in the 60s at all, but he raced in the 70s. And on August 7th, 1976, he went through the guardrail at Shawano Speedway in turns 1 and 2, hit a light pole and a huge pile of boards. There used to be a lumber yard of some sort outside of turns 1 and 2 at Shawano Speedway. So there'd be piles of lumber stacked, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 feet high. But he went through the guardrail, hit a power pole or light pole, and then hit a wood pile. And then the car also started on fire. And in the accident, there's Leroy and his wife actually sued the Shawano County Egg Association, which put on the races. I don't know if they won their suit or not. But basically Leroy was a quadriplegic after the accident, and they claim that because they sprayed the fire retardant on the car while he was still in the car, and they said that that caused brain damage and caused him to become a quadriplegic. So yeah, that's one of the dark clouds over the speedway.
Fortunately, we don't have a lot of those stories, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a racer's worst nightmare, right? Having something major like that,
Mhm.
fire, getting paralyzed. I mean, that's a terrible deal.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to Google and Google Leroy Arnold Shawano Speedway, and you can pull up the whole lawsuit, what was being claimed and stuff like that.
Okay.
I was looking through it quickly before the show, and it's quite a long document.
Okay. So there you go,
So,
fans. Check that out. Get a little Shawano history for your liking. Not any kind of history that we like, but at the end of
right.
the day, I mean, history is history, and that's definitely a part of the big half mile out there. I'm gonna go over to northern Wisconsin. I guess it would be northwestern, more northern, straight northern. But Steve Keeber. So Steve Keeber, a driver from Ironwood, Michigan, Bert. He's in the ABC Raceway Hall of Fame in Ashland, Wisconsin. I read up a little bit on him. I remember him, right? He always had really cool looking cars. And I remember him primarily being in a modified. He ran in a street stock. He ran in a modified. He's got double digit feature wins over at the ABC Raceway. And kind of a neat little deal. His dad, they called him Chum. I don't know what his actual name was, but Chum Keeber was actually a former announcer up there. So that's kind of cool, right? So the announcer, and then I guess he'd come on the track and be like, that's my boy out there, that kind of deal. So that's kind of fun. And now his son, Steve, no longer with us. He passed a couple years back. But his son, Mitch Keeber, is racing in a Midwest mod up at the ABC Raceway. So I remember seeing him race. I remember going to the Red Clay Classic with my dad, and he always had one of the sharpest looking cars. And, you look back at some of the pictures you see online, it seems like he had a big smile on his face. And it seemed like that family was a family that was very well invested in to the history at the ABC Raceway in Ashland. Speaking of history at a racetrack, another family we have, Bert, from up in northern Minnesota, the Danielson family. So Dynamite Dean Danielson, that's what they called him, Dynamite Dean, back in the 90s. I raced against him when I first started, orange and blue 76, kind of like the Union 76, kind of them colors, right? He ran Thunder cars, which were essentially hobby stocks, big old, I guess they would have been mostly Impalas back in the day. He won races. He won at Grand Rapids. He won in Bemidji. He won in Hibbing. Also, Dynamite Dean, sponsored race cars. I know he sponsors Chast and Pinkbone to some extent. He's helped at the racetrack, done a lot of maintenance. He's still involved, goes every single week, and I have an opportunity to see him a couple times a year. So Dynamite Dean, one of the legends up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and his son, Bert. His son actually was a very well accomplished racer as well, Tim Danielson. Tim ran I remember him running in a street stock. He ran in a super. He ran in a mod. I don't know if he ever ran in a Midwest mod, but he won races in everything that he was in. And guess what? He's nowhere to be found. He's married, right? He's got a couple of kids. I think they run marathons, which means they're a lot skinnier than this guy, right? Okay, that's what that means. But I don't remember what it was for. Might have been an unsportsmanlike deal or whatever. But he got suspended one night in Proctor, and I was in the super stock, and we used to park next to him. And his dad said, "Well, hey, why don't you drive the car? You want to drive the car for Tim? He can't race tonight. You want to drive?" I'm like, "Yeah, what the hell? I'll get in it, right?" Well, I got in it and I went out, and I think remember we had Jim on here a couple weeks back, my old pit guy.
Yep.
He was in a street stock at the time, and I feel like I might have got second to him in the heat race, or either that or we both won our heats. I can't remember for sure. But then me and Jim and then Paul Carlson, I believe it was, had a three-way battle for the lead in the street stock, and I lost my brakes and I ended up getting second in that deal. I think old Chonga there, my boy Jim, I think he got a flat. I think the other 71 car won, but I got to race his car, and I haven't seen this guy, Bert, in it feels like 15, 20 years. He never goes to the races at all. His dad goes every single week, and it'd be kind of cool to see Tim and kind of see what he's up to. He's a good racer up in northern Minnesota. Now let's head down to southern Minnesota, Bert. We're going to go down to St. Charles, Minnesota, which is just, I guess it would be east of Rochester. Back when I won my first national championship in 2000, one of the guys competing against me, Randy Geisler, he had a 76 car, and I never really got a chance to know him. I think he got third behind Don Eichens and I that year, but he won a bunch of races. Him and Mark Teskey were fantastic drivers in the super stock division, and I went down there, and I was fortunate enough to beat him on his home turf. But him, I think he had Action chassis, and Bert, I don't know if this is exactly positive or not, but I believe Action Engineering, I think that's tied in with Sorensen. So man, it was Dustin Sorensen, Mike Sorensen is his dad. I think Mike Sorensen actually built his cars. So he had a pretty good hot rod back in the day. So kind of tying that southern Minnesota back together. And Randy hasn't been in a car in years. I don't know if he goes to the racetrack anymore or not. I tried looking him up on Facebook, wasn't able to kind of, I was hoping to maybe connect with him in one way, shape, or form. But any of you fans out there, if you know what old Randy Geisler's up to, post in the comments. We'd love to hear about it. Another one we have here, Bert, let's head up to northern Minnesota. Remember I talked about Lem? He's tied in with this family. Well, of course, you heard of Steve Vessel. You heard of Derek Vessel, right? Well, Steve has a brother. Actually, there was two brothers, right? There was three. So Steve Vessel, the most accomplished of that group, right? But his brother Dave and his brother Brian were both accomplished racers as well. So Brian, part of just a huge legacy, right? If you go up to Hibbing, Minnesota, and you say Vessel, everybody in town will be like, yeah, they race, right? Good racing family. Well, he won the 1983 Labor Day shootout in the 6-cylinder division. So the 6 cylinders, I think it ended in 1988, transitioned into super stocks, but he was very competitive. His brother was both brothers were competitive. And then he transitioned into the supers, had very sharp looking race cars, very clean, well kept, super meticulous. Had an opportunity here a couple years back. Went to the Labor Day shootout. The Vessels always have a big camping area, bonfires, kind of the culture of Labor Day, and had an opportunity to visit with him just a little bit. And not really sure what he's up to, but he still does go. And when he goes to the races, now they go, of course, to watch Steve's boy, Derek Vessel, one of the most talented drivers up in Hibbing right now. So very, very cool history there with the Vessel family. And I'm going to call it right now, Bert. I should write this one down, but Lem is going to probably do some kind of a docu-series here on the Vessel family. And if I'm sure he has it in the works because there's a lot of history with that family up in Hibbing. Another one we have here from Hurley, Wisconsin, which is kind of right on the border of Ironwood, Michigan. So if you're a snowmobiler, you know all about Hurley. They like to have a lot of fun in Hurley. A lot of fun, right? You think snowmobiling in the winter, there's a lot of bars, maybe a little bit risque, a little bit of dancing, all kinds of fun stuff. Well, this guy fits right in with Hurley, right? He is fun. This guy, he won races. John Callis, I got this one from my buddy Lauren, who always sends us some information, and he raced in the streets, the mods, the supers, won races and everything. And I said, man, do you have any fun stories about him? He goes, I do. He came to Proctor, Bert, in the super stocks, must have been in the 90s, probably, maybe early 2000s. Don't know for sure. And evidently he got into some melee down the front straightaway and tore all the billboards down all the way down the front straightaway with a super. Not a good thing to do. So I think they maybe had to slide them back. And he told Lauren, he goes, why do you got to remember that one? That's the story you got to remember, really, that one right there. And so you heard me talk about Crash a little bit. Crash Carlson up in Proctor.
Yes.
So I don't know if you know this about me, Bert, but I like to screw with people a little bit every once in a while. I like to do that, like to have a little fun, right? So my first year in the mods, I was fortunate enough to go down to Speed Weeks. I raced for John Carpenter down there. It would have been 2000. It would have been the February of 2009, and Jared Landers and Austin and Ty Dillon. I mean, they were rocket ships. I mean, they were fast. And I'll never forget, Jared Landers had the 777, and underneath his car, he had deer hunting ribbon, like the orange, I'm talking about, the roll of orange ribbon. And he had it taped, just in a couple spots, kind of like streamers, and kind of more than anything, you kind of do that. You blacked out. Like if you felt like you were on your game, everything underneath your car was black. That way people like me couldn't crawl underneath it and try to figure out what you got going on. So they put these orange streamers there because they'd kind of catch your attention and take attention from what you were doing. So that year I come back up to our neck of the woods, and I put orange ribbons underneath, and I figured I'm going to kind of be cool like him, and wasn't as fast as Jared Landers, but I did it anyway, won a couple races. The agenda comes out, Bert, for the rules meeting, for the WISSOTA rules meeting. And Bill Engelstad, the head of WISSOTA Teching, said, we got to get rid of these ribbons. No more ribbons. Got to be gone. Got to get rid of these ribbons. Can't have them. They're distracting. And I'm like, who are they distracting? And why are they looking underneath my car? Right? I mean, you're the tech guy. You can look at whatever you want. Drivers shouldn't be looking underneath my car. They should be racing, right? And he's like, we're getting rid of them things. So we're at the meetings, and literally it's coming up to lunchtime, right? And they said, okay, we're going to push back. And I looked at the agenda. I'm like, holy shit. The next thing on the agenda is like banning ribbons underneath race cars. So I grabbed old John Callis, and him and I ran up to the local, I don't know if Ace Hardware or some kind of store or whatever over in St. Cloud. And we got ourselves a roll of ribbon, right? So we come back, and we got there, and Crash is outside the meeting room. And we take me and John Callis, and we were done up like the Ultimate Warrior. We had ribbons off our arms, off our head, off our ankles, and we did up Crash, right? And he's all done up. And literally, I put Crash on a luggage cart at the hotel. No, this is the rules meeting for WISSOTA, all the tracks, right? And literally, I have John flail the door open. He opens the door. I push Crash in, and Crash is like, this ain't distracting. What's distracting about ribbons? And we go rolling right through the meeting, all the way to the front of the room, back to our seats, and people are laughing. And Billy Engelstad, not impressed. He was pissed, not impressed. And I think the only saving grace is I had Crash with me, because it's like, what do you do to Crash? It's Crash. You can't screw with Crash, right? So me and Callis did that, and Lane Roberts, God rest his soul, good buddy of mine that promoted over at KRA Speedway in Wilmer, passed away a couple years back, and he literally stood up. He goes, "Are you guys shitting me? Like, are we gonna even waste our time voting on this stupid shit? Like, I make a motion, we just move on." I second, and it moved on, and we never even had to vote on the old ribbons. So had a little fun with that at the expense of Bill Engelstad, and he was not happy, but that's okay. That was the fun part of it. So Bert, let's before we jump in, I got a couple trivia questions before we do. Little shout out, Impact Health Sharing. So if you pay for your own health care, right? If you have health insurance, you're paying too much. Hit me up, 218-969-1380. I can get you a quick quote, get you some information, see if we can save you some money. Family cost, typical family cost, right around $600 a month. So for a lot of families, that's half or even cheaper than half. So it's worth checking into, and no obligations. We'll just get you some information and go from there. So got a couple here. We're going to go one local, one national. Okay. And I couldn't find anything necessarily with the car number 76, but I got the year. Not 1776. We know what that's all about. We got 1976. Okay. 1976, Bert, the first ever Red Clay Classic up at the ABC Raceway in Ashland, Wisconsin. So northern Wisconsin, you're kind of a little bit familiar with some of the drivers up there. Late model, A-main winner in 1976.
Tom Nesbitt.
That's a good guess. Good guess. Okay, I'll give you another clue. This driver had his hauler was super cool, and up until a couple of years ago, I thought he built this deal. Turns out his hauler was originally Dick Trickle's. Tom Steiding pitted for Dick Trickle. He ended up buying the hauler, so it went to Tom Steiding. He bought the hauler, and it became the orange and white, like a rollback deal, kind of a cool looking deal from up in Duluth, Minnesota.
One of the McMahons.
Nope, that would be another good guess. And I just like throwing clues around that are kind of funny. So again, I was kind of a troublemaker, Bert. This guy went on, and well, first I got a couple different clues. You might not know this guy, but Puka would already have guessed this because he knows this guy. So this guy went on to be a track prep guy, both at Proctor, did it up in Hibbing. I think he might have did it in Superior for a while. And there was a year, Bert, where the super stocks ran first after intermission. Okay. And he'd go out there at intermission with the grader and start at the top and grade down the track. Okay. All the way around, all the way down to the bottom. Now, the problem with that is you're grading all the marbles across the racetrack. So you got a bottom lane, and the rest of it is straight marbles until it finally cleans off. And then the late models had a really good racetrack every single night. Super stocks did not. It was absolutely straight marbles, one lane on the tires. Well, after a couple straight weeks of getting my shit tore up because I had to start 12th because of the point average, Bert, I proceeded to go over to this guy, and I kind of told him what I thought of his track prep. Okay. Didn't really like what I had to say. I pull in the next week. I had a parking spot next to the concession. So picture pulling, you go down the back straightaway, and I hooked a right, and I parked along the fence behind the back straightaway grandstands. I pull in there the next week. There's freaking Lake Superior in my pit spot. I mean, flooded. There ain't a freaking, like, I'm looking around going, what the hell? There ain't not one drop of water anywhere else in the whole facility. My whole pit spot is like Lake Superior. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. I look over at him. He's chewing on a cigar, kind of looks, and he walks away like, I got that son of a bitch. Yep, he got me. He flooded my spot. He's like, I'll show this guy. It was kind of funny. Now looking back at it, he got it. It was good. It was definitely good. His grandson is a very, very good late model driver today, Travis Budaslavich.
Oh, Johnny Johnson.
Bingo, you got her. Yeah, Old Norris, Johnny Johnson, the first ever late model winner at the Red Clay Classic, 1976. So good job. I wasn't sure if you get that one.
Well, the only reason I got it is because I interviewed Budaslavich for a dirt late model article several years ago. So I got his back history.
Yeah, good old. I asked Johnny about that at Labor Day a couple years ago, and I said, "Did you do that on purpose?" And he smirked. He goes, "You know I did." I'm like, I gotta admit that's funny shit right there. He got me. Now we're gonna go back. You want to get your favorite events? World 100. You're a World 100 guy. You like to go to the World 100. I got to get there. I haven't been there yet. So this gentleman won the 1976 World 100. Also,
Sanger.
Nope. Ed Sanger. Nope, not Ed Sanger. 1976 National 100 at the East Alabama Speedway. He also won the 1976 United States Dirt Track Championships in Champaign, Illinois, paying $4,500 to win. Incidentally, in that race, Ed Sanger got third. Gary Webb, who still races today, Bert. 1976, he still races today. He got 20th in that event.
Is it Larry Phillips?
Nope. Dalton, Georgia is where he called home. Charlie Hughes, number 39. I saw some pictures. I'm like, I seen them pictures floating around online. I got to stump Bert. You got the Johnny Johnson one after a few clues. I never heard of Charlie Hughes either, but I figured, you know what? We got a World 100 winner here. Now you got to do it. There's your homework assignment. You're gonna have to do a little homework on the World 100 because I might be pulling some more World 100 stuff. So Charlie Hughes, 1976 World 100 and National 100 winner, and the U.S. Dirt Track Championship in Champaign, Illinois. Big race, Bert. 4,500 to win. Big race. That was a lot of money back in
Back then,
1976.
yeah.
So, but super cool, and kind of some pictures online. And again, fans, if you have any, if you have any 76s, if we missed any, right? Shoot us some pictures, shoot us some stories, put it in the comments. If you have comments or stories about any of the drivers that we talked about, share them. We love to hear that stuff. And and we're going to move forward with this. This episode is going to, obviously it's Friday, but moving forward, look for this every single Friday on our YouTube page, Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube, like, follow, share, do all them happy stuff, right? And hopefully enjoy the content. It's fun, Bert, taking a look back, taking a turn back in time, talking about some of these drivers. Any closing thoughts on any of these 76s, or is there any more that you maybe thought of before we sign off here?
I haven't thought of any more while we've been I'm sure there's more 76s in eastern Wisconsin, but I just can't think of them.
I had somebody tell me, man, Dougie still races. So we'll save that for another day. So, all right. Well, I'm Ryan. That is Bert. Thanks for tuning in to our episode of Blast of the Past, and make sure to check out all of our content on the One to Go Show platform. Thanks for tuning in.